Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, Amanda Head, and I'm obviously hoping that it's Friday, but it's not. My co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon, is out on assignment tonight. And as always, I am reporting to you from Washington, D.C. and the WiredToFishCoffee.com studios. WiredToFishCoffee.com. That is where you can go to get the official coffee of Just the News. You can go over there and go to WiredToFishCoffee.com and get a 10% discount. They've got mugs, they've got coffee, a whole lot of good stuff over there. So use the code JustNews at checkout for 10% off. All right, we made a lot of news over here last night when John and I interviewed President Trump. So much news, in fact, that it has been circling around all of the mainstream news networks last night and earlier today. And most of them had something to say about the president's response to the Epstein files and calls for more transparency. And it is very clear that the president wants to move on from that. That's the clip that made all of the big headlines. But what got buried by the CNNs and the MSNBCs of the world is that the president spoke a lot about the probes into the Russagate hoax and Jack Smith's case involving classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, a case that certainly seemed to be politically motivated. They didn't really want to tackle any of that. But there's also a couple of other things the president said that the mainstream media just didn't have time to get to, I suppose, like commenting on Senator Adam Schiff's mortgage fraud allegations, something that Just the News broke all the way back in October of last year. Here's that.
Well, you know, he looks to me like he did commit that. I looked at it just recently. I read a story about it, and it's, I mean, to me, it looks like he committed mortgage fraud. No, he should be, he said about my children, Don, in the case in particular, who knew nothing about the Russia hoax. Think of it. It was made up by Adam Schiff and Hillary Clinton in the group, right?
Yeah.
And now everybody knows, they've admitted it. It was a total hoax. That my son should go to jail for a very, very long period of time. And he knew it was a hoax. This guy knew it had nothing to do with my son. It was them using that as a way to save the embarrassment of Hillary Clinton's loss in the 2016 election.
Interesting that the media doesn't share that clip on Adam Schiff's alleged legal wrongdoings and the Russagate hoax. It's almost as if they don't want to report on those two things in particular. Oh, and one other thing that they don't feel the need to get to, I suppose, President Trump's economic policy, as well as reining in America's debt crisis. The president addressed that with us yesterday as well. I have a story out this morning with a number of lawmakers and experts who are increasingly confident that you might be the one to be able to put the country on a path to balancing the budget. The last time was the beginning of this past century. Rising tariff revenues, growing spending cuts. How possible is that before you leave office?
Well, I read your story this morning, not having anything to do with this call, actually. I read your stories all the time. And, yeah, I have a real shot. We're taking in tremendous amounts of money. You saw that we had a $25 billion surplus last month.
Yeah.
And the tariffs haven't really started by comparison to what they will be. You know, we're doing them on cars right now, cars and steel mostly. But the other ones kick in on August 1st, and they're very substantial. And the answer is, yeah, I think there's a real shot.
And of course, we already saw a rare budget surplus for the month of June because of that increased tariff revenue. But again, that's something that the mainstream media just doesn't want to report on. So if somehow you missed the interview, you can find much more about what the president told us over on justthenews.com. And I have just one more story to get to before we get to our first guest this evening, happening over in New York City, where Democrat nominee for mayor and also self-described Democrat socialist Zohran Mamdani is going up against current mayor Eric Adams and now independent candidate and former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. Now, it's widely believed that Cuomo continuing to run will split the anti-Mamdani vote, allowing the Democrat nominee to win pretty handily. And perhaps because of that, we have a new report out over at justthenews.com that reveals Mayor Eric Adams actually out-fundraised both Mamdani and Cuomo. Adams ended up raising over $1.5 million over the last month compared to Mamdani's $852,000, and Cuomo managed to raise just $64,000. So another reason why that money could be flowing to Adams. Many in the city are concerned over Mamdani's past refusal to condemn the phrase "globalize the Intifada." Here he was a few weeks ago on Meet the Press doing exactly that.
Do you condemn that phrase, globalize the Intifada?
That's not language that I use. The language that I use and the language that I will continue to use to lead this city is that which speaks clearly to my intent, which is an intent grounded in a belief in universal human rights. I don't believe that the role of the mayor is to police speech in the manner especially of that of Donald Trump, who has put one New Yorker in jail who's just returned to his family, Mahmoud Khalil, for that very supposed crime of speech. Ultimately, what I think I need to show is the ability to not only talk about something, but to tackle it and to make clear that there's no room for anti-Semitism in this city.
Yeah, that does not sound like a condemnation to me. And it turns out that just a couple days ago, he's now allegedly telling business leaders in the city that he will discourage the use of globalize the Intifada. Those fundraising numbers might explain why. Now, our first guest, I think, is going to have some thoughts on that because he dropped a bipartisan resolution today in Congress to condemn that disgusting phrase. Joining us now, Congressman representing Indiana, Rudy Yakum. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
I think for our audience, we hear this phrase thrown around and sadly it is often in conjunction with violence. It, of course, is anti-Israel, anti-Jew. But at the heart of it, what does it mean to people who are offended by that phrase?
Well, this is a call for the elimination of people who are Jewish. It's an anti-Semitic phrase. It's something that needs to be condemned. And if the likes of Mamdani, who's running for mayor of New York, if they won't condemn it, the Democrat nominee, we in the House of Representatives will. That's why this morning I introduced this bipartisan resolution with my friend Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey to call for the House of Representatives to condemn this anti-Semitic phrase. Since October 7th, we've seen the rise of anti-Semitism across the globe. This is something that has festered in universities in the United States for years. We've recently seen a rise in attacks against Jewish people here in this country, whether it's Boulder, Colorado, or even here in Washington, D.C., with the two people who worked at the Israeli embassy. And now this all culminates with the nomination of Mamdani in New York City. So if he won't condemn this, we will in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And kudos to Congressman Gottheimer. Do you anticipate that there will be a majority of Democrats who support this resolution? Because let's face it, there are some interesting connections between the Democrat Party and some of the organizations that are supporting these types of protests.
This is something that is deeply divisive in the Democrat Party. Many of the Democrats, even here in the House of Representatives, left-wing progressives, refuse to condemn the term globalize the Intifada, just as Mamdani did in New York. And so this is something that has to be condemned. Everyone should support this. This is should be controversial. It's just simply a common sense resolution.
Yeah. I hope that it spreads like wildfire because I don't think I ever imagined that in 2025 this is something that would have to be explicitly written out in a resolution. But thank you for putting that out there. I also want to talk about another bill that you introduced to protect unemployment benefits for those who are truly without work, people who truly cannot get work at this point. This doesn't apply to people striking. This doesn't apply to people who are sitting at home who are able-bodied and can get work. Tell us about it.
We've introduced a few bills dealing with unemployment insurance because a big part of what I believe is that we should protect it for people who actually need it. One of the bills that I've recently introduced doesn't allow these left-wing liberal states like Washington and Oregon to do things like allow workers who choose to go on strike to collect federal unemployment benefits. Why should hardworking Americans have to pay for unemployment benefits for workers who make the choice to go on strike? And now you've got some of these left-wing states like Washington and Oregon actually encouraging workers to go on strike and then saying you can collect unemployment benefits while you go on strike by choice. We shouldn't allow that, and that's why I've introduced this bill.
Do you think that that is kind of an outside-the-box way for them to oppose the Trump administration?
I think it's an outside-the-box way for them to do that, but I also believe that we have to be thinking outside the box of how we combat that. Yeah. And that's why we've introduced this bill. It's just common sense. Hoosiers that I represent, they just want to go to work every day. They want the federal government to leave them alone. And if they get laid off, that's why we have unemployment insurance benefits. You shouldn't be able to go on strike and collect unemployment insurance. That's happening in a lot of these left-wing states. We shouldn't allow it, and that's why I've introduced this bill.
Yeah, I love it. And I love so many of these initiatives happening in the House right now. Obviously, we saw a lot of cost saving for the American people. The Trump tax cuts codified in the One Big Beautiful Bill. So you guys are getting a lot done. And now we have this rescissions package. I think it started at a little over $10 billion. It was reduced to $9 billion, but it passed through the Senate. So this is another one of those ways I think that you guys are standing on being fiscal conservatives. How many more of these rescission packages do you anticipate are going to be recommended by the White House and then ultimately and subsequently getting passed through the House and the Senate?
Well, my hope is that we pass this rescissions package that came back from the Senate here in the House yet tonight before we leave town later tonight or tomorrow. But then my hope is that the White House sends another one down here. They sent this rescissions package down of about $9 or $10 billion to make sure that we could actually govern, that we could actually come together as Republicans, pass this in the House and the Senate. We will get that done. And then the White House is going to send another one down here. My hope is that we would take it up quickly. We would act quickly on it, get it done. And let's just keep doing this. Let's continue to govern. Let's continue to lead and fulfill the promises that we all made to the American people. And for me, that includes restoring fiscal responsibility to Washington. I believe at my core that the federal government taxes enough. Americans deserve tax cuts, but we also spend too much. And we've got to scale back the size and the scope of the federal government. That's what we're doing through these rescissions packages that President Trump has sent us.
Yeah, and speaking of that rescissions package, I want to ask you specifically about the funding pulled for organizations like NPR and PBS, because I got an email from Screen Actors Guild. I still get their emails. And Congressman, it was hair on fire. Same thing with liberal news organizations. People are going to die. It's going to be awful. The country's going to, fall apart. If these organizations are so important and so important for free speech and the cause of democracy and all of these things that they say, why don't Democrat and progressive organizations just fund them themselves?
The reality is in today's media environment, there are a number of media sources that are available to the American population, much different than when we started going down this road. What you also find is that for a lot of these organizations, whether it's PBS or NPR, a majority of their funding today actually does indeed come from the private sector. And so our hope is that as we pull back on some of these funds, the private sector, if they think it's worthwhile inside their own communities, that they'll step up and fund it. But the question that we always have to ask ourselves is, what is the role of the federal government as it relates to the taxpayer dollars that we take from Americans? We've got to be good stewards of that money. We've got to start scrutinizing every dollar that goes out the door in the federal government, because for far too long, we had unchecked federal spending that got way out of control. And now's the time to start looking at every dollar that we spend in the federal government.
Yeah, and in so many aspects, it really did operate like state-funded, journalism, if you even want to call it that. So it was moving in a very scary direction. So maybe it was time. Before I let you go, I want to ask you, we had President Trump on the program last night, and I asked him about balancing the budget, because balancing the budget, I think these days around Capitol Hill, a lot of people think, oh, that's a pie in the sky idea. We're never going to be able to get back there, especially since COVID came along and increased spending and things like that. But we've got the rescissions packages that you and I just talked about. You have multiple Supreme Court decisions that have come down allowing for the president to use mass layoffs over at the Department of Education. And then on top of that, so far we've got $106 billion worth of tariff revenue, which could balloon to $300 billion of revenue by the end of the year. So with those three factors, with cutting spending, cutting the size of government, and also bringing in more to the Treasury, do you think it's conceivable that under President Trump, maybe it happens later in this term, but we could actually get to a place where there is a balanced budget?
But we have to go down the road of restoring fiscal responsibility. And it's through the things that you outlined, but also let's not underestimate what we did in this One Big Beautiful Bill, helping facilitate economic growth. When you go back to the first Trump administration, we had tremendous economic growth in the first few years of President Trump's presidency. We will get there again. President Biden left President Trump with an absolute mess. And so the tax cuts that we implemented through our One Big Beautiful Bill, that will certainly help us down the road of economic growth. But also the rescissions packages that you mentioned, we also can't forget about how much federal spending we actually cut in the One Big Beautiful Bill. We cut well over $1 trillion of federal spending in that bill. It's the largest spending cut in American history through that bill. And so I'm very proud of the work that we did in the House to get that across the finish line. And so whether it's spending cuts or tax cuts that help facilitate economic growth, both of those things work together to make sure that we restore fiscal responsibility to Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. Indiana Congressman Rudy Yakim, thanks so much for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Next, we spoke to Congresswoman Julia Letlow about the attacks from the left on ICE. So what more can be done about all of it? That's after this break.
Hey, everybody. Have you heard that in April, China significantly reduced its American Treasury holdings to the tune of $8.2 billion? And it could signal what's coming. China is now third place among foreign holders for the first time since 2008. But this is bigger than just China. Foreign central banks are systematically moving away from the U.S. dollar while stockpiling gold at unprecedented levels. They understand what most Americans don't. A collision between Trump and Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is inevitable. Powell's term runs through 2026, giving him extraordinary power to resist Trump's economic agenda. With $36 trillion in national debt and interest payments consuming more than our entire defense budget, the mathematics have become unsolvable through traditional means. That's exactly why our friends at American Alternative Assets created the urgent new guide, Fed versus Trump, the coming battle for America's financial future. This guide reveals the Fed's most powerful weapon against any president and shows how everyday Americans can protect their retirement savings before this showdown destroys unprepared portfolios. The smart money isn't waiting to see who wins. Call 855-GOLD-340 or visit my website, johnlikesgold.com. That's 855-465-3340 or go to johnlikesgold.com. Get positioned before the battle begins.
Welcome back, everybody. Things got out of control very quickly during a federal raid on a marijuana farm in California a few days ago. When ICE and other federal agents moved in, protesters swarmed the scene. They got violent. They shouted down officers. They threw objects. They tried to block arrests. And President Trump is not letting it slide, calling the violent agitators slime balls. And Trump authorized ICE to go after anyone who attacks law enforcement during federal operations. His message was very clear. If you assault federal agents, you are going to be held accountable. Imagine that. So we spoke to Louisiana Congresswoman Julia Letlow earlier about all of that and much more. Take a look.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. So, we are starting to see these agitated situations with protesters. But in this one, they found children who were laborers, and there are just a lot of controversy surrounding them. And yet Gavin Newsom and a lot of California Democrats are defending it.
It's hard to believe that anybody could defend that. Governor Newsom has made a travesty of California, and there is no excuse to ever cause any harm or attack federal agents while they're doing their job. So absolutely condemn what's happening there.
Yeah. Congresswoman, there are so many of your colleagues that have acted inexplicably in this moment. You have a Democratic congresswoman charged with assaulting an officer at an ICE facility when she tried to break in. You've got another congressperson charged or accused this week of doxing an ICE agent who then gets injured because their identity is out there for the bad protesters to go after. You've got many standing up for people who were involved in child trafficking, human trafficking, terrible crimes, MS-13 gang members. How does the Democratic Party see heroism in the criminals that our ICE agents are arresting?
It's absurd that they see heroism in this. The American people gave us a mandate, gave the administration a mandate that we had to shut down what was happening at our borders. And President Trump and his administration has done that. They're continuing to do that. As a mom with young children myself, I feel safer with them at the helm, making sure that not only did they shut down the border, we have the lowest records of crossings in history, but also are continuing to make sure that these criminals, these illegal immigrants who came to our country illegally and who are committing crimes in our country are being deported. And I don't think you'll find any mom and dad that is upset about that. But we have to make sure that we continue to protect our ICE agents that are doing the great work, their heroic work. They are the true heroes in this story.
Yeah.
Congresswoman, I know you've been very vocal about what a lot of people see as a longstanding ridiculous situation that federal benefits have gone to illegal aliens in this country, especially in the medical sector with Medicare and Medicaid. It's been really strange to see Democrats conflate legal and illegal. But when it comes to these benefits, when you have illegal aliens on the system, you're leeching those resources. Aren't you leeching them away from the people who need it the most?
Absolutely. Why should our tax dollars go to benefit those who came to our country illegally? All we're asking is that they go back to their country of origin and do it the right way. And not just healthcare, but yes, they are definitely taking dollars that are needed for those people that they were intended to help. The elderly, pregnant single moms, those with special needs who truly need those dollars, they are actually taking those funds away from them. So yes, you're seeing it in healthcare. You're seeing it in our education system, which is so important to me personally, as a prior educator myself. Our schools are being overrun. Our teachers are quitting because there's just not enough resources. So something has to be done. I'm so glad that the Trump administration is meeting it head on.
Yeah, it's an important moment. And I think future generations will look back at this era and see what stewards were we at this moment. Yeah. Congressman, when you look out, there has been a lot of concern about the weaponization of government. We broke a story earlier this week that confirms that the FBI has created a grand conspiracy case, basically looking at every event from the moment Hillary Clinton got cleared in the email scandal when there was still evidence to be investigated by James Comey, to the Russagate, all the way through to Jack Smith and his raids on Mar-a-Lago as one ongoing conspiracy. I'd just like to get your take on what that looks like, whether you think that's a good approach, and whether this is a sort of investigation that might get us the accountability we've all been waiting for.
Yes, I'm so glad that this is all being uncovered. It is way past time. The weaponization of government never needs to happen. You know, we saw this happen right after COVID with parents who went to school boards and displayed their displeasure with what their children were being taught in the classroom. They were unfairly targeted by the DOJ, labeled as domestic terrorists. That's why I put forward my Parents' Bill of Rights last Congress. Who would have ever thought in today's age we would actually have to have a Parents' Bill of Rights? But here we are. The weaponization of government absolutely has to stop. And I'm so glad that all of this is coming to light.
Yeah. So important.
And that parental rights issue also folds into school choice and the Department of Education and the layoffs that the Supreme Court just said, what was that, yesterday? Yeah, you can lay them off, 1,400 or thereabout employees. As you talk to parents across Louisiana, do they feel like the freedom is being given back to them and they are maybe less targeted by the government with Trump in the Oval?
Absolutely. You know, in Louisiana, that's where we got the idea for the Parents' Bill of Rights. It was a bipartisan bill that we've had in place for years to protect parents, to make sure that they always have a seat. And when it comes to their child's education, that they always have a seat at the table. President Trump has always championed this and is continuing to make sure that power is being put back in the hands of parents, and also taken away from the federal government, going back to the states, the local governments, where it desperately has belongs and will continue to thrive. We know best how to educate our children. They're our children, not the government's.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Congresswoman, a few months ago, I don't think I would imagine asking this question, but now it seems like a reality. You've got tens of billions of dollars a month in new tariff revenues come in. You've got the BBB getting some about $200 billion in discretionary spending off the payroll per year. You've got the Supreme Court telling President Trump, yes, you can fire employees and shrink the government the way you see fit, long as you meet Congress's mandate. It looks like and you got rescission bills that are starting to work their way through the House, including getting rid of PBS and NPR off the taxpayer dole. It seems like the tools are in place for President Trump to put us on a path back to a balanced budget, more revenue from tariffs, big spending cuts across all three of those different dynamics. Do you think we're heading in that direction possibly?
Absolutely. I believe under President Trump's leadership, we are entering the golden age. This is so important to me. I sit on the Appropriations Committee.
Right.
So I'm looking at these dollars every single day, and it's an exciting time to make sure that we are taking a crack at this $37 trillion of debt that we're placing on the back of our children and future generations. And to have a president that is committed to making sure that we have an America that will prosper again. He is setting us on that course. He's done it once before. He's doing it again. It's exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no doubt.
Very quickly before we let you go, energy as a contribution to our economy is a big, big piece of that puzzle. And offshore drilling, very important to the state of Louisiana. Are you seeing that ignited under President Trump?
Absolutely. He's always been such a huge supporter. We know in Louisiana how to do it best. We need the federal government to get out of our way. We know how to deliver clean, safe energy to fuel the world. And I'm so grateful to the president and his administration for making sure that we can do just that off the Gulf of America, off of Louisiana's coast.
I love it. Louisiana Congresswoman Julia Letlow, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break and we'll have much more for you on the other side.
Hey, folks, let's be honest. Our body lets us know, right? We're not getting any younger. And if you want to look and feel your best, you need to check out our good friends at Pure Health Research. They have 45 premium health supplements designed to help with every health goal, whether it's boosting your energy, trimming belly fat, supporting healthy blood sugar, pumping your testosterone up, or even reducing swelling in your legs. Pure Health Research Supplement Store has you covered. Each formula is crafted with natural, non-GMO ingredients backed by clinical research and manufactured right here in the good old USA. And here's the best part. Pure Health Research is offering you an exclusive 35% discount. You heard me right, 35% off. Just go to purehealthresearch.com and use the coupon code JUSTNEWS at checkout. With their 365-day money-back guarantee, there's zero risk in trying something new, so why wait? Head over to purehealthresearch.com right now. Explore their 45 amazing supplements and save 35% before this deal ends with the coupon code JUSTNEWS. Don't miss this chance to feel your best.
Welcome back, everybody. Over this last weekend, it was announced that Attorney General Pam Bondi fired at least 20 employees who had previously worked on January 6th cases, as well as some who worked with Jack Smith on his Trump classified documents investigation. So, will this latest effort help clean up the Department of Justice, or does more need to be done? Here to discuss this with me is U.S. Senate candidate for North Carolina and January 6th defense attorney. He's also a retired U.S. Navy JAG officer and a former special assistant U.S. attorney, Don Brown. Don, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Amanda. It's good to see you today.
Good to see you, and I want to get into the grand conspiracy case, but I want to start with what I teased at the top. Pam Bondi firing 20 DOJ employees, these folks who were working on cases like January 6th and the Trump documents case. I know this has got to be an attempt to try to clean up the DOJ. There are a lot of folks still there, though, who are never Trumpers, people who, if given the opportunity, they would do it all over again. How many more people are going to have to be fired?
Well, it depends on how many that are there that took part in all this. During the years of the Biden administration, we saw the Department of Justice basically wage war against the Constitution on multiple fronts with all of these bogus prosecutions, from Jack Smith to Fannie Willis to Alvin Bragg to Letitia James, to other prosecutions as well. And in those J6 cases, that entire prosecution scheme was an attack, an assault on the constitutional rights of J6 protesters. If you don't believe it, I had a book come out called Kangaroo Court in October, and I did a chapter called J6 versus the George Floyd protest. To take George Floyd, for example, George Floyd, those protests were the most expensive riots in American history and some of the deadliest. $2 billion, 20 people killed. But Democrat prosecutors, Amanda, to get this, dismissed 95% of the misdemeanor cases that were brought under the George Floyd protests, mostly for trespass and for curfew violations. By contrast, we had about 1,575 J6ers arrested, and by my last count, only 11 of those have been dismissed either by the District of Columbia or by the Department of Justice. Amanda, that is a 99% prosecution rate, where with the J6 arrest, you had a 95% dismissal rate by Democrat prosecutors. This goes to show that those prosecutions of the J6 cases basically violated the Trump supporters' rights to equal protection of law. So I was good with all of the pardons that President Trump handed out there. But Pam Bondi is taking a good step here to start rooting those J6 prosecutors out, rooting out all these prosecutors who are engaged in lawfare. And I would like to see some prosecutions brought about against some of these folks as well, because they really wage war on the Constitution with all this lawfare that we saw during the Biden DOJ years.
Yeah, I mean, it's prosecutory malfeasance, I think, and it should definitely be looked into. When it comes to J6 prisoners, I think when President Trump assumed office again, a lot of people, it kind of fell out of the news cycle because people just kind of thought, President Trump is in office, he's going to examine these cases, he's going to issue pardons or commutations where needed. And I think a lot of us kind of, we took our foot off the gas a little thinking, well, everything's going to be taken care of. Are there still January 6 prisoners who are falsely imprisoned?
I'm not aware of any at the moment, but I want to check with my friends over at Cowboy Logic, Donna and Don. They knows that exactly. But there are many J6 prisoners who are still feeling the after effects of the long imprisonments that they face both in D.C. and in Texas and other places as well. And I'm hoping that they're going to be able to get some compensation out of the government for that.
I certainly hope so. And just imagine if President Trump had not won. I mean, where would we be in this country in everything, but especially with that? I want to ask you about this weaponization working group that Attorney General Pam Bondi established back in February to investigate unethical, targeted investigations against President Trump, again, going back to what we were talking about. These are folks who are already within the Department of Justice. So these are folks who are going to be looking at their colleagues. As a special assistant U.S. attorney, when you're looking at the behavior and the maneuverings of your colleagues, and maybe they're not direct colleagues, maybe they don't even know them, but does it cause you to look at things through a different lens? Are you going to be as harsh if you know that these are people who you have worked beside for a while, even if you're on opposite sides of the aisle?
Well, DOJ officials, Amanda, are supposed to be held to a higher ethical standard, a higher legal standard. And one of those prongs that I hope that the president will declassify deals with take for example, Jim Comey. Jim Comey and the Hillary investigation came out on July 5th, 2016, and famously said that no reasonable prosecutor would have prosecuted Hillary for having classified information on her server. Whereby we turn around and prosecuted the young man Christian Saucier, prosecuted General Petraeus, and not only that, but President Trump himself was prosecuted for having allegedly classified documents at Mar-a-Lago when he had a legal right to have those classified documents under the Presidential Records Act. So what this is showing is a two-tiered standard of justice. And what's happened with the Department of Justice, again under the Biden administration, is the weaponization has been off the charts. Even Bill Barr gave a speech to Hillsdale College in 2020 talking about the tremendous weaponization of government inside the DOJ. We have corrupt prosecutors in there who have taken their responsibilities as governmental prosecutors and turned those into an excuse to become a political hack. And I wish Pam Bondi the best. I know she's gotten some criticism for a couple of things, but I can tell you, if you can bring about this grand conspiracy prosecution and go back and take down some of these folks who have been involved again in bastardizing the Constitution, I think she will have earned a few brownie points, and she's going to get a lot of that luster back she had when she was brought into the administration. I'm very glad to see her involved with this. I'm glad to see Kash Patel involved in this, and I really hope that the president is going to declassify those two tranches of classified information that we're going to need to get to the bottom of both these targets in this investigation.
Yeah. Don, I'm so glad you brought up Hillary Clinton. And as we have talked about, as John and I have talked about on air with this grand conspiracy case, this could open up a treasure chest of information and transparency for the American people across 3 different elections, obviously starting in 2016, but 2020 and 2024. And this grand conspiracy, it seems like the inception was Hillary Clinton's emails. So what we have figured out, a pattern that seems to be, Hillary Clinton has an email problem, they target Donald Trump. Hunter Biden has a laptop problem, they target Donald Trump. Joe Biden has a documents problem, they target Donald Trump. Their answer to all of their own alleged possible crimes was to throw it on Donald Trump time and time again. So if this grand conspiracy case is able to be built, they impanel a grand jury in a fair state like Florida. What do you think some of the charges available? As we go down the buffet line of charges, what's available?
Well, that's a good question. When you look at conspiracy against rights, 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242 is a deprivation of civil rights under color of law. So what you see happening is you see people working within the Justice Department who are attacking the constitutional rights of the President of the United States and others as well. I mean, just look at what happened at Mar-a-Lago when the Fourth Amendment was thrown into the trash can with search warrants based upon fake dossiers going all the way back to the Hillary campaign. And just remember this also, Amanda, it isn't just the grand conspiracy theory that's been announced that your colleague John Solomon so brilliantly broke the other day. But remember this, we have the director of the CIA now, John Ratcliffe, actually referring, and this is separate basically, but it's related, actually referring criminal charges now to the Department of Justice against the former CIA director, John Brennan. And also, he's taking a look at Comey as well for the way the Hillary Clinton, laptop server situation was handled and the double standard of justice. So we're seeing now multiple fronts moving toward trying to hopefully bring some of these folks to justice. And I think if we can bring some of them to justice, that's going to satisfy a lot of Americans who have been basically despondent over what's clearly been a two-tiered system of justice, favoring the rich and the famous, the Democrats, the millionaires, and the billionaires, while crushing working Americans who don't have the money to defend themselves against this DOJ, which has been very much philosophically oriented toward the left in the last 4 years, especially of the Biden administration, and even before that.
Yeah, it absolutely has. And before I let you go, I want to ask you about your Senate race. You are running for Tom Tillis's seat. Tell us about what the people are telling you there in your state.
Well, Senator Tillis backed out, and we like to take credit for that. As I told you last time, we give credit to the president. But it's been exciting. And we've been all over the state of North Carolina. North Carolina is a pro-Trump state. It's a conservative state. By the end of the year, the Republicans will have eclipsed Democrats in registration. We're following Florida's footsteps in that regard. And we've got nothing but absolute encouragement in this race. We've been endorsed by the 24th National Security Advisor of the United States, General Mike Flynn, by Sidney Powell, by General Jerry Boykin, former Delta Force commander, and others. So we're excited. We're going to continue to press forward. We're going to take the nomination, and we're going to defeat the Democrats and keep this seat in Republican hands for the final 2 years of President Trump's administration and the first 4 years of President J.D. Vance's administration.
That sounds great. All right, tell everybody where they can find out more about your campaign.
Please go to brown4nc.com, brownfornc.com. Pay us a visit. Shoot us a little bit of money. We need some. Drop us a line. We'd love to have you on board the team. We're going to win this race. We're going to continue to take the flame of Make America Great onward and forward in North Carolina and throughout the United States with this Senate victory.
Absolutely. All right. Brown, F-O-R-N-C. Everybody go check it out. Don Brown, former Special Assistant U.S. Attorney, as well as Senate candidate there in North Carolina. Thanks so much for being with me tonight. And after the break, we're going to talk about America's debt problem and how you can protect yourself against it on the other side. Welcome back, everybody. We have seen a lot of financial ups and downs in the last few months. The U.S. dollar has had some major fluctuations, and while the One Big Beautiful Bill has some great things in it, it also contributes to our government's seeming addiction to spending. So can the government get a handle on it? And if they can't, what can you do to protect yourself? Joining us now to explain, the CEO of American Alternative Assets, Shannon Davis. Shannon, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Good to see you. All right. So when the One Big Beautiful Bill was being debated, I think that I had everything from an A- down to a C- gradings from members of Congress. But the general consensus was this is as good as it is going to get, and we have to get this passed because we have to protect our majority going into midterms. But is the Big Beautiful Bill actually fiscally responsible?
Great question. Yeah, this is all about the fiscal portion of it. This is fiscal policy by gimmick and gaslight. Both parties are addicted to handing out freebies, one with spending, the other with tax cuts. America doesn't need another showman. It needs a party of a no, to say no to spending more money. And it's tough, though. I mean, you've got lobbyists lining pockets of senators. So there's people that are benefiting both on the Democratic side and the Republican side. And a good example is when Doge was opening everything up to go in there and rip apart a lot of the inefficient ways we were spending money, but they couldn't get anywhere with it. And you know what's going on with Doge and the relationship between those two guys. It's a mess now.
Yeah, it is. And I know a lot of people want to see that relationship repaired. But, you know, when it comes to our government spending, I think somewhere around 60 to 62% is mandatory spending. And nobody wants to be the party to touch the mandatory spending. Where would you want to see some of that fiscal responsibility settle within the bill?
Well, that's the problem. If you look at the whole equation, there's really none of it. You know, you talk about, you know, the bill, it's going to increase defense and border spending with cutting little from major programs like Social Security and Medicaid, which is the biggest problem, but you can't touch that because of what it would do. I mean, that would be political suicide for someone. It's you can't fight math at this juncture, and you know that's why the Mar-a-Lago Accord is something now that people should be paying attention to, because our debt capacity is just unsustainable, and the track that we're on, the spending is projected at 90 trillion over the next 10 years. While the revenues are only 64 trillion. That's a 26 trillion shortfall, in addition to the 37 trillion we already have on the books.
Oh, yay, $70 trillion in debt. That's fun. What is the Mar-a-Lago Accord?
So the Mar-a-Lago report is completely flipping over our monetary system, and that's what he's preparing to do by raising the deficit, not only through interest payments, but through these bills that are being created. It's no different than the 1980s Accord. There's a dollar bill that has lost almost 11%, worst start since 1973, that is just no longer being used on a global level. And it's going to be something that's going to be switched to a completely different currency. That's why we're having currency wars, trade wars. Tariffs are great, but really we've only bagged $100 billion. We'll only bag $300 billion, and that's really only a drop in the bucket by the end of this year with the debt we're already holding.
Yeah. Shannon, you and I imagine, are around the same age. We're still pretty young, but I think about our children and our grandchildren. When they are up against the wall with this debt and they are staring down the business end of $70 trillion in debt, what are they going to do?
Yeah, well, it's really about, the grandparents, the parents. It's about creating, a legacy that can actually last and withstand the test of time. Basel III was just approved July 1st. Basel III is where now gold is a tier 1 asset. It can be 100% leveraged on banks' books as revenue. And again, gold and silver, platinum year to date's up over 71%. Nuclear fusion, nuclear control throughout our world is a real thing. And so what children can do is hope and pray that their parents have prepared and left a legacy behind that's actually holding its value like gold and silver, unlike the dollar bill.
Yeah. All right. So when people go to your website, when they go to johnlikesgold.com, my favorite website, my favorite web domain on the entire internet, when people go there, can they find gold bars, gold coins? What are these physical assets that you guys deal with?
Yeah, great question. They can find any type of bullion, which is just a metal, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, bars, coins, rounds. There is hundreds of different assets that you can diversify within the asset class. And not only will they find that, but they'll also find one of our newest guides, which is the big, beautiful bubble that gives you a lot of insight to what we're touching on today, but dives deep into the bubble that's getting ready to pop. But they can find not only a learning center on our website, they can find blogs, There's tools on there for a dollar reset calculator, an annuity calculator. There's just a bunch of tools that they can weaponize themselves with and learn from.
I love it. I love it. CEO of American Alternative Assets, Shannon Davis, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And for our viewers, everything we just talked about and more, it's broken down inside American Alternative Assets free guide, The Big Beautiful Bubble. It is the plain spoken truth about what is happening with America's debt, inflation, spending, and economic trajectory, plus charts, timelines, and sources that you can trust. So go to johnlikesgold.com right now to get your free copy. That is johnlikesgold.com. Don't get blindsided. Get informed. All right, everybody. Coming up next, there is one big thing the OB3 gets right, and that is fixing America's tax code. We're going to explain why that's so important and could lead to much smaller spending bills in the future. Next. Welcome back, everybody, to our final segment of the night. We talked about some of the issues around the One Big Beautiful Bill in the last segment, but as I mentioned, there are some very important positives too, especially surrounding the U.S. tax code, and it could cause us to see much smaller spending bills in the future. That sounds like a very good thing, right? So joining me now to discuss that is Research Fellow for Tax Policy over at the Heritage Foundation, Preston Brashers. Preston, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Amanda.
All right, so talk to us about what's in this bill that could cause future classes of Congress to pass smaller spending bills.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about this bill, a lot of talk about this being a big tax cut. The reality is most of what this bill was simply avoiding a massive tax increase. And that tax increase was already baked in because we have so many temporary policies. And we've had many temporary policies going back to the 1990s. It's kind of a game that Congress has been playing. And I think this Congress actually did the right thing here in just making sure that we had a permanent tax code. Because one of the things that happens is whenever you have this massive tax cliff, which we were talking about $4 trillion on net, $9 trillion of gross tax changes that were in limbo coming into this year, that of course there's going to be a big bill because of course Congress isn't going to want to come in and just allow a massive tax increase. And so the fact that they made so much, they didn't make it all permanent, but they did 90% of the tax code that was temporary is now permanent. And so we're in a much better place to avoid those big must-pass fiscal bills that could just get loaded up with a whole bunch of stuff we don't like.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Most of government is stuff we don't like, let's be real. Not the people. Well, sometimes the people. Speaking of people, there are conservatives out there who are criticizing the bill. There's plenty in there, I suppose, for them to criticize. But what did you find to be the crux of their disgruntledness when it came to passing this, particularly people like Thomas Massie?
Yeah, I mean, look, I respect and I like Thomas Massie a lot. I agree with him on a great deal. But the reality is, if nothing happened, it was going to be a massive tax increase. And what did they? And in terms of the spending, people talk about the spending in this bill. The reality is they cut almost $1.5 trillion of spending. They added a couple $100 billion for border and defense, but the spending went significantly down as a result of this bill. So, the deficits that people are talking about, a lot of that's bogus. A lot of that's just based off of JCT's scoring of these provisions, what they think that is going to happen would have happened in terms of the tax revenues that would have come in if they allowed these tax increases to happen. But in my mind, if you allow a massive tax increase to happen, you shouldn't expect all the revenues to come rushing in, because that's just not how it usually works. Massive tax increases, that's no way to pay your way out of a big deficit hole, which is the only way to truly do that is going to be through actual tightening of the belt through spending cuts.
Yeah, but nobody wants to do that, right? That was one of the things I just talked to Shannon about, especially when it comes to mandatory spending. No party wants to be the party that does that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd be happy to know that all of the cuts in here, they actually were mandatory spending, or at least they're classified as such.
Yeah.
Because it happened through a reconciliation package. You actually can't cut the discretionary spending in a reconciliation package. So there were a lot of constraints that Congress had to live within because this was through a reconciliation bill.
Yeah.
And for what they were facing, I actually think they did a phenomenal job of getting through a good bill It's going to give people, individuals, and businesses a lot of stability and certainty that they didn't have before.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for that information. I love all of these nuanced parliamentary rules. There are a ton of them, so I can't wrap my brain around all of them, but I love little nuggets like that. Preston Brasher's Research Fellow for Tax Policy over at the Heritage Foundation, one of our favorite groups over here at Just the News. Preston, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, that's all the time we have for you tonight. If you missed our interview with President Trump last night, you can head over to justthenews.com and check it out. Also, americasvoice.news. It's also over there. So everybody have a great night. We'll